Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again to take your source material, really cut to the chase, and give you that, quick but solid understanding you need.
Exactly. Our mission is always to get past the surface level, find those specific, telling details.
And today, we've got a really interesting set of sources. We're diving into the Pakistan Army, but maybe not in the way you'd immediately think.
Right. Not the conventional military angle. The sources focus heavily on their role in disaster relief, humanitarian service. It's quite a significant part of their identity, according to this material.
Yeah, the core idea, the claim we're looking at, is that this army is, well, the source says, not just a shield on the borders. That's the quote.
It paints them as essentially the nation's first responders on a massive scale, a primary mechanism when disaster hits.
So our dive today is all about unpacking that, looking at the evidence presented, seeing how soldiers, trained for combat, transform into rescuers, doctors, even builders during national crises.
We're tracing that evolution, pulling out the key facts, the logistics, the surprising parts of how this dual role works, based on what these sources tell us.
Okay, let's get into it. So first off, this fundamental idea of a dual role. How do the sources frame this identity shift for a military force?
Yeah, because instinctively you think army, you think defense, borders, security, right?
Standard stuff. But the material we have here really hammers home this other side. It forces you to adjust that frame.
It really does. The sources argue this isn't just an occasional thing, it's woven into their function. Cyclones, earthquakes, floods, landslides, they're presented as being right there.
And it's positioned as a structural necessity almost, given the kinds of environmental challenges the region faces pretty constantly.
So it's not an afterthought, it's planned for.
That's the implication. The sources suggest it's a recognized dual role. I mean, think about military training discipline, resource management, rapid coordination. Those skills are directly transferable. Okay, that makes sense. When everything else breaks down in a huge disaster, that existing structure, the Army structure, is maybe the only thing big enough and fast enough to step in.
Exactly. The logistics, the command structure, it's already there. It can be mobilized quickly when civilian systems are overwhelmed.
And the sources get specific about the roles soldiers take on. It's not just crowd control or basic support. They list things like rescuers, doctors, builders.
Right, and these aren't trivial roles. Being a rescuer in, say, an earthquake zone, that means heavy machinery, urban search and rescue in collapsed buildings. It's incredibly dangerous, specialized work.
Or in floods, navigating boats through, fast currents filled with debris.
Definitely. And the doctor role, we're not just talking basic first aid. The sources describe setting up and running entire field hospitals.
Wow. So surgery, managing complex medical supplies, keeping things sterile in, non-sterile environments for potentially months.
Precisely. It's a huge undertaking. And then there's the builder aspect.
Which sounds like the long game.
It is. It's not just clearing rubble. It's rapid construction, temporary bridges, access routes, and then potentially long-term rebuilding. Schools, hospitals, essential infrastructure.
That involves serious engineering skills.
Right.
Combat engineers, logistical planners.
All needing to work fast, under pressure, and build things that can withstand future shocks. It's a very broad skill set they need to deploy.
So this all ties back to something the sources emphasize right at the start.
Right.
The meaning of the uniform in a crisis. They say, in crisis, uniforms mean compassion.
That's a really key phrase from the material. It's presented as the foundation of this humanitarian mission. It's about deliberately shifting the psychological impact of that uniform.
From authority or force to, help us here.
Exactly. When everything's chaotic, communications are down, local government might be completely swamped, the sight of an organized, disciplined force arriving is meant to be that first sign of stability, that organized help is coming.
It provides psychological reassurance, maybe?
That's the idea presented. It's the first step towards community recovery, seeing that capable help has arrived.
But how do they make sure that perception holds? It's one thing to show up, but for the uniform to consistently signal compassion, that needs institutional effort, surely.
Oh, absolutely. The sources imply this is part of the training, part of the doctrine for these kinds of operations. Codes of conduct for interacting with civilians, focusing on efficiency, but also, minimizing any sense of imposition.
Service first ethos.
That's the goal described. The idea is that the mission is purely about human need, human safety, regardless of politics or anything else. That uniform signifying compassion is positioned as the core principle.
Okay. So if that's the foundation now, where did this all start? The sources must trace it back. We need to go back quite a way apparently, to an event that really cemented this role.
We do. Over 50 years back to a disaster on an almost unimaginable scale.
Right. The sources pinpoint 1970 East Pakistan. And the description of the Bola cyclone, it's stark. It just says it killed hundreds of thousands.
The scale is hard to comprehend. And that sheer scale, according to the material, is what fundamentally overwhelmed all civilian capacity. It wasn't just a disaster, it was a complete breakdown.
So this event becomes the sort of crucible moment where the Army had to become the main responder.
That's how it's presented. A tragic but defining historical precedent. When you're dealing with casualties on that scale, instantaneously, no local service has the reach, the manpower, the logistics. The state needed something deployable immediately across vast, devastated areas.
And even back then, 1970, the Army's response is described as immediate and practical. Deploying Army helicopters is mentioned first.
Which would have been absolutely vital. Getting eyes on the damage, reaching isolated pockets, delivering critical personnel like medics.
Yeah, assessment from the air, and delivering aid where roads just didn't exist anymore.
And boats, too. The sources mention using boats, presumably whatever military and requisition craft they could get for rescue for transport through the flooded areas.
Navigating debris, strong currents, must have been incredibly difficult.
No doubt. And critically, rushing medics in, not just for treating injuries, but the sources imply for preventing disease outbreaks too, setting up health points.
So even back then, you see those core elements: air mobility, water transport for rescue, and medical teams.
The foundations were being laid, yes. But you have to remember the context. 1970, no satellite phones, no advanced GPS, probably limited specialized rescue gear compared to today.
So how did they manage?
The sources suggest it was about leveraging what they did have. Military discipline, numbers, basic engineering skills to clear paths, and sheer determination. Improvisation was key. It sounds like brute force logistics meeting unwavering commitment.
Okay, now here's where it gets really layered contextually. The source material highlights this specific tension. Though politics divided, soldiers served humanity. That's a direct quote. What's the significance of that distinction?
It's presented as a really crucial point. The backdrop was immense political turmoil, the lead up to the breakup of Pakistan. Yet, the sources argue the humanitarian duty was performed irrespective of that.
So it established a principle that this role transcends politics.
That's the argument, that the Army's duty in a national crisis, the duty to save lives, was defined early on as being separate from and maybe even above the political fractures. The soldiers' mandate was universal within the nation.
That's quite a statement about their institutional self-perception, or at least how the sources want it perceived. Humanitarian action as a unifying, non-political space.
Exactly. It frames the humanitarian mission as a kind of absolute moral imperative. By drawing that sharp contrast, politics dividing, service uniting, the sources set this precedent. Disaster relief is positioned as pure, nonpartisan duty to the people.
Which helps maintain cohesion, maybe.
Yeah.
Or projects stability.
That seems to be the underlying message, that the military provides continuity and stability focused on human need, regardless of political storms. This 1970 event in this narrative wasn't just about response, it was about defining that enduring ethos.
Okay, let's jump forward. 35 years later, 2005, October 8th, an event etched into memory, the Kashmir earthquake. The sources describe it bluntly. Entire cities collapsed.
This was a different beast altogether from the cyclone. Devastation, yes, but in incredibly difficult mountainous terrain in northern Pakistan and Kashmir.
Right. Not coastal plains, but high mountains.
Yeah.
That changes everything logistically, doesn't it?
Completely. You had intense urban search and rescue needed in places like Muzaffarabad, which was just flattened. But you also had remote mountain villages, completely cut off by landslides, needing aid. It was a multi-front disaster zone.
And the scale of the response required. The sources talk about extensive field hospitals being set up. What does that actually entail?
It's immense. It means flying or trucking, and not just personnel, doctors, nurses, technicians, but entire surgical units, power generators, water purification systems, massive amounts of medical supplies. We're talking facilities capable of handling hundreds of casualties, complex surgery.
Orthopedic trauma, presumably. Lots of crush injuries.
Exactly. And maintaining that capability, often in tense or temporary structures, for months on end, coordinating with international medical teams who also rushed in. It required international-level organization.
And beyond the immediate medical crisis, the sources highlight the long-term reconstruction, specifically mentioning rebuilding schools. Why focus on schools?
Well, rebuilding schools goes beyond just shelter. It's about restoring normalcy, investing in the future of the community. When schools are destroyed, it's a deep psychological blow.
A symbol of hope, maybe.
Precisely. The military's engineering corps stepping in to rebuild them signals a commitment beyond just emergency aid. It's about social restoration, rebuilding the fabric of the community.
And the terrain.
Hmm.
The sources emphasize the logistical challenge, mentioning airlifting survivors from remote mountains.
Yeah, this was absolutely critical. High altitude helicopter operations, think thin air, unpredictable mountain weather, needing powerful helicopters. The sources don't specify types here, but things like Chinooks or Pumas would be needed to fly into potentially unstable landing zones near landslides.
Because roads were just gone.
Wiped out. Bridges collapsed. For thousands in those high villages, helicopters were literally the only way out, the only way supplies could get in. It's a capability few, if any, civilian organizations possess on that scale.
And how was this effort seen internationally? The sources mention world agencies praised the Army's courage.
That external validation is significant. Praise from the UN, from major international NGOs. It speaks to the perceived effectiveness and professionalism of the response.
Courage here means more than just individual bravery.
It implies institutional courage, too, I think. The willingness to take on such a massive, complex operation, coordinate it effectively, and importantly, work openly with international partners. It suggests a certain level of transparency and competence in managing that global interface.
And the impact on the people affected. The sources connect it all back to providing hope.
Yes, and that's crucial. It wasn't just about aid delivery, it was psychological. When you've lost everything, seeing a capable, organized, and compassionate response can be the difference between utter despair and the beginning of recovery.
It rebuilds trust in the system, in the state's ability to function.
That's the argument. Establishing order, providing care, starting reconstruction. It demonstrated that the state, through the Army in this case, could still function and protect its citizens even in the face of overwhelming catastrophe. It was about restoring confidence.
So the earthquake was a massive sudden shock. But then we have these recurring flood events, 2010 and again just recently in 2022. Huge swaths of the country underwater. The sources say the Army became the lifeline of millions.
These floods present a different challenge. Often slower onset than an earthquake, but geographically vast, covering enormous areas, turning farmland into inland seas.
So the problem shifts from localized, intense rescue to
What?
sustained support across huge distances.
Exactly. Mass evacuation, managing displaced populations on an enormous scale, long-term logistical support for basic survival, keeping millions of people alive when their homes and livelihoods are gone.
And the sources get specific again, which is helpful. They really focus on the use of boats for rescuing stranded families.
Yeah, and you have to picture the scale. It's not a few rescue boats. It would require hundreds of military watercraft capable of handling swift, debris-filled currents operating continuously.
Moving families, the elderly, sick people, maybe some belongings, livestock.
In incredibly dangerous conditions over vast flooded areas, searching submerged villages, the planning and discipline required for that alone is immense.
And then once people are rescued, they need somewhere to go. The sources talk about establishing and managing large relief camps.
Which is like setting up and running small cities almost overnight. This is where that military organizational structure really comes into its own, according to the material.
Oh, that. What's involved?
Think about sanitation for potentially hundreds of thousands of displaced people. Clean water, waste disposal are critical to prevent disease. Then there's security within the camp, and crucially, systematic, fair distribution of food and supplies.
Avoiding chaos and ensuring everyone gets what they need.
Right. Preventing secondary crises within the camps themselves. That requires rigorous organization and management, often sustained for weeks or even months.
And there's another detail the sources highlight. Medical teams vaccinating children during these floods. That sounds proactive, not just reactive.
It's incredibly important. Floods are breeding grounds for waterborne diseases, cholera, typhoid. These can kill more people than the initial flooding.
So vaccinating is about preventing that secondary wave of deaths.
Absolutely. And doing it effectively means managing vaccine cold chains in difficult, hot, flood-affected areas, keeping records, ensuring widespread coverage. It shows a sophisticated public health strategy integrated into the disaster response. Not just treating the sick, but preventing illness on a mass scale.
All these actions, the rescues, the camps, the vaccinations, the sources seem to tie it together with this idea. Resilience is built when soldiers and people stand shoulder to shoulder.
That quote really emphasizes the cooperative aspect described. It's not just the army imposing solutions. Resilience, in this view, comes from working together.
How does that work practically?
Well, soldiers might rely on local knowledge. Where are people trapped? What are the local conditions? And the people rely on the Army's resources, transport, medical care, food. It suggests a level of mutual respect and coordination.
Incorporating local leaders, maybe.
That would be key for success. That shoulder-to-shoulder idea implies partnership, a shared effort in recovery that involves the community itself, not just having things done to them. It builds trust and local capacity for the long term.
Okay, so we've seen this role evolve from 1970 through the 2005 earthquake, the massive floods, adapting to different kinds of disasters. What happens when modern technology gets layered on top of all this experience? Right, the sources indicate a definite shift towards integrating advanced technology now. It's not just about reacting anymore, is it?
No, it's about leveraging tech for the entire cycle: preparedness, prediction, real-time management, and response. Especially with climate change likely increasing the frequency and intensity of these events, technology becomes crucial.
Relying on just manpower and traditional methods is too slow for the scale of disasters we're seeing.
Exactly. You need faster assessment, better coordination, more precise resource allocation. Technology enables that.
So what specific technologies do the sources mention? Drones come up first for surveillance and assessment.
Drones are game changers. They provide rapid, high-resolution images or video of damage in areas that are impossible to reach quickly on the ground. You get immediate situational awareness.
And GIS mapping. That sounds important for planning.
Oh, it's fundamental. Geographic information systems, GIS, are like super smart digital maps. You can layer all sorts of data onto them.
Like what kind of data?
Things like floodplain models, population density, locations of hospitals or supply depots, real-time road conditions, damaged infrastructure, all overlaid on a map.
So you can see exactly where help is needed most and how to get it there.
Precisely. It moves resource allocation from guesswork to data-driven decisions. You can optimize routes, identify vulnerable populations, plan evacuation corridors much more effectively. It's the backbone of modern logistics in these situations.
And tying this all together, digital command centers.
Right. Taking all that incoming information, drone feeds, satellite imagery, ground reports, supply levels, medical stats, and consolidating it into a single real-time picture for commanders.
So everyone's working off the same information. Military units, civilian agencies, NGOs.
That's the goal.
Right.
It enables unified command, avoids duplication of effort, prevents logistical jams, and speeds up decision-making, which is critical in those first crucial hours and days.
And this tech allows for more proactive work. The sources mention predicting potential disasters, real-time monitoring, and even cyber alerts.
Yeah, cyber alerts likely refers to using digital communication networks, mobile networks, internet, dedicated systems for rapid, targeted warnings and evacuation orders. It's faster and potentially more precise than traditional sirens or broadcasts.
And using things like weather modeling, seismic data, to actually predict where disasters might hit.
Exactly. Moving towards forecasting risk and prepositioning assets, issuing early warnings based on scientific data. It shifts the focus towards prevention and preparedness, not just response.
This whole integrated tech-heavy approach leads the sources to make a pretty bold claim that the Pakistan Army is evolving as a global model of humanitarian response. What makes it a model?
I think it's the combination of factors honed through repeated, large-scale, real-world application. They've faced diverse, high-intensity disasters, floods, earthquakes, cyclones, across incredibly challenging geography.
So they've been forced to adapt and integrate.
It seems so. The model described involves integrating military discipline and logistics with high-tech tools like GIS and drones, while also maintaining essential low-tech capabilities like boats and field medicine, and crucially, coordinating with civilian authorities and international partners.
So for other countries facing similar high disaster risks,
this approach, leveraging a large, organized force, integrating technology, focusing on the full disaster cycle, and fostering civil-military cooperation, offers a potential blueprint. It shows how military capabilities can be systematically applied for national resilience and civilian safety.
it's an interesting take on soft power almost, demonstrating competence in humanitarian response as a measure of national strength and reliability. Hashtag tag outro. Well, this has been quite a journey through the material. From 1970 and that devastating cyclone, seeing soldiers carry children through floodwaters, set up massive relief camps after the 2005 earthquake, distribute food, vaccinate, right up to using drones and digital command centers today.
Yeah, the sources definitely build a strong case for their central argument. This is an army that, in their words, fights wars but also heals wounds. That humanitarian role isn't portrayed as secondary but as a core continuous function.
The sheer scale and frequency of their deployment in these roles, as described here, is quite something.
It really is. The sources paint a picture of an institution constantly tested by nature and constantly adapting its response.
So to wrap up, we always like to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to consider. Something drawn directly from the source material that maybe pushes the perspective a bit.
And this material concludes with a very strong patriotic statement. Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. Now, importantly, the way the source material builds its case, this aspiration isn't just linked to traditional military power.
Right. The implication, reading between the lines of the sources we've discussed, is that this potential superpower status is also deeply connected to the strength shown through this very humanitarian action, through national resilience.
Exactly. The ability to withstand these immense internal crises, to protect and rebuild, that's implicitly framed as a key component of national strength and potentially future global standing.
So the question it leaves you with is, well, how much does that internal resilience, that demonstrated capacity to manage massive humanitarian challenges, contribute to a nation's overall power and influence in the world today?
Is soft military influence, the ability to heal, rebuild, and manage internal vulnerabilities, effectively becoming just as important, or maybe even more important, than traditional hard power in defining global leadership in the 21st century?
Something to think about. How much weight does that demonstrated capability carry on the world stage?
A compelling question to ponder, based on the perspective offered in these sources.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time with whatever source material you send our way.